Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Aisyah Salmaa and right now I want to share about how to correct students speaking mistakes without destroying their confidence. This is one of the things that we should know if we want to become professional English teachers. We should know how to deal with students' errors. Mistakes are normal to happen in the process of language learning. We need to take risk, fail, see our mistakes, and try again to learn anything new. The reason behind students' poor contribution to conversation classes is probably because of the fear of being wrong, making mistakes, and losing face in front of their friends. So, it is the teacher's role to create a student-friendly atmosphere in the classroom. We can do so by showing positive attitude towards students' attempts to speak and encouraging them to take risk with the English language. This is the only way to develop their confidence, fluency, and overcome their reluctance to speak English. There's a list of techniques for correcting student speaking mistakes, and that's what I will share with you now. First, do not correct. Ignore the mistakes, at least for the time being. When a student gives a speech or speaks spontaneously in pairs, immediate correction will intimidate them, make them lose the train of thought, and simply discourage from participating in the classes. Ignore the mistakes for the sake of fluency and classroom dynamics. Encourage your students to self-correct. Don't correct on the spot. Instead of giving them ready answers, you can give your students a chance to think and self-correct. They will probably realize and correct their own mistakes. By this, you develop their autonomy and raise language awareness and responsibility of the level of their English. Teachers can indicate that a student has made an error without using a word. I will give some examples of nonverbal ways of error correction. First, the look. When you spot a mistake, you can give your student a hint with a raised eyebrow or putting up a red grammar flag or a toy when a student has made a mistake. Second, gesturing backwards when a student fails to use a verb in the past. Third, crossing your hands or fingers to signal wrong word order. Fourth, pointing your finger to your ear to indicate gross mispronunciation. And fifth, writing a big S in the air to show the lack of S ending for plural or third person singular. And sixth, silence. Don't be afraid of it. Don't give any feedback for a few seconds or move on to another student immediately. Just wait for the student's reaction. Let them think and revise their answer. Students need time. Give them a chance to self-correct. And seventh, putting your thumbs up as soon as the student has corrected their mistake. Using gestures will remove any seriousness and criticism from correcting errors and add some humor and lightness to your lessons. But if those ways don't help, use verbal correction technique as a last resort. You might ask a question like, is there another way to say that? Repeat the wrong sentence with a rising intonation or a funny facial expression. For example, when a student says, I went to school with your father. And then you might ask, you went to school with my father? Repeat the wrong sentence, pausing before the wrong word so that the student can complete it correctly. The second technique is peer correction. Some students find it easier to accept correction from their peers or from their friends. Engage the whole group in error correcting. This way, you make sure that the rest of the group pay attention when someone gives a speech and are not busy with something else. You could, for example, distribute some slips of paper and ask your students to note down any mistakes that their friends have made, and then collect the slips and read the sentences aloud without mentioning any names. Poll the students if the sentences are correct or not and come up with the right versions. Clear up any doubts and write the correct sentences on the board. Or you can split the class into pairs or small groups and ask the most able ones to act as a teacher and correct others' mistakes. The third technique is delayed correction. When students give a speech or are engaged in a conversation, don't interrupt them with any comment. You can take notes of their mistakes in your notebook And leave your comments till the end of the lesson or after all students have finished speaking. When taking notes, divide the mistakes into logical subgroups such as grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation. At the end of the day, without mentioning any names, report the mistakes back. Students probably recognize their sentences, but they are not targeted. Discuss the answers and write the correct versions on the board. I believe these sentences will sit in their heads as the most correct. While some mistakes are hilarious, share them with your students, help them see the humor of the situation. The next technique is when you comment on your students' mistakes, bear the following in mind. Offer constructive criticism. Don't be all negative about mistakes. When you discuss students' performance one-on-one, start with a positive comment. For example, you have used a lot of sophisticated vocabulary and advanced grammar structures, but show them that you appreciate their effort and contribution. Be sympathetic. When you comment on students' mistakes, use a tone of voice and body language that help them accept criticism. Give them support with encouraging words such as good job or smile. And then the last one is be selective. We don't have to correct every single mistake that we spot. Focus on target mistakes which are key to your lesson aims and ignore the non-target mistakes for a moment. Choose only one or two that hinder understanding. Be subtle, be clever. When you comment on your students' errors, avoid using their names. Don't use negative, straightforward feedback words such as wrong or bad grammar as they are intimidating. Mistakes help teachers pinpoint problems with the grammar that their students have as well as check and encourage progress. We need to be aware of whether we need to focus on accuracy or fluency. Different techniques are advisable during the presentation or practice stage of the lesson. When we introduce new material to our students and do a lot of drilling exercises, then it is important to correct any mistake on the spot. Different techniques should be employed when our main goal is to develop fluency. Let's not read mistakes as a necessary evil but as a learning opportunity. I believe this attitude will help students overcome their reluctance to speak English. Sometimes it's the fear of both speaking English and speaking in public. One thing to add, giving effective feedback is an art form that every top-class teacher should perfect. A student that receives great feedback during the lesson walks out of the door feeling confident and motivated to keep improving. But a student that receives poor feedback will feel the opposite and might even end up dreading the next class. So, never underestimate just how much of a difference the smallest bit of praise can make. Some of your students may act cool and indifferent, but they will privately remember every bit of positive feedback you give them. Praise them and be genuine about it. Praise the students for something they did well, even if it's the simplest thing. But avoid giving too much praise because it will become meaningless and lose its effect. You can also explain why they did a good job, so that it will help them do it again in the future. Feedback is sometimes underestimated by teachers because it seems simple on the surface, but in reality, the more thought that you put towards the feedback that you give, the higher quality your lessons will be. So, to sum it up, there are 5 techniques for correcting student speaking mistakes that we can try doing. First, don't correct immediately and encourage your students to self-correct. Second, peers or friends correction. Third, delayed correction. Fourth, offer constructive criticism. And fifth, be selective with the mistakes. And don't forget to give effective feedback to the students. That's all from me. I hope all that I've shared with you just now can be clearly understood, and I hope that later we can be great English teachers who teach professionally and give our best to the students. Thank you for your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.